The Good Garden: How One Family Went from Hunger to Having Enough. Written by Katie Smith Milway. Maria Luz scrapes the dry brown earth with her hoe. Her family's corn is short and scrawny this season. "Why do you frown, Maria Luz?" asks her father. She looks up and smiles. She loves to garden with her padre. She has helped him burn the weeds off their land to prepare it for planting. She has poked holes in the earth and pressed corn and bean seeds into them. Soon they will pick the cobs and shuck the beans and pile their crops in the cookhouse to dry. So many of Maria Luz's memories have grown from this patch of earth. But now she is worried. "Has the land lost its goodness, Papa?" Her father lowers his head. When he looks up, there is sadness in his eyes. "I fear it may be so." Maria Luz and her family live in the hills of Honduras, like the other campesinos who farm nearby. They have a small plot of land that in good years grows just enough food to feed them. But this is not a good year. Poor rains have kept the corn from growing tall and insects have eaten holes in the stalks. Their harvest will be small, so small that they may even have to eat the seeds they should save to plant in the spring. That night, Maria Luz overhears her father speaking in low tones. "Do not let the children go hungry, Madre," her father says. "Eat the seeds if you must. I will go to the highlands to earn money for more seeds to plant in the spring." But if Papa cannot find work, Maria Luz knows what will happen. He will have to borrow seeds from the grain buyer, the coyote, who will make the Duartes pay back 3 times the seeds he lends. The coyote makes money from poor farmers and gives them debt in return. If their crops fail again, it will be worse. The Duartes will lose their farm to the coyote and have to find new land. On the day Papa is to leave, Maria Luz watches her baby brother Papito, while her mother pounds corn to make tortilla dough. Before he goes, her father will have his favorite meal: warm tortillas, fried plantains, and beans topped with fresh cream. As her father sits down to eat, Maria Luz hides the pot of cream behind her back. "I need something sweet," says Papa. "Here I am," says Maria Luz. "Ah, yes, you are sweet, mi carino, but you are not so good on beans." It is an old joke between them, and it makes them both smile. "I have something important to ask you," Papa continues. "Your mother will be busy caring for you and Papito while I'm gone. I need you to care for our land. Can you plant our winter vegetables?" Maria Luz knows how important the tomatoes, chilies, and onions are for extra food and to make their meals taste good. She is proud to be asked and nods. When it is time to leave, Papa kisses Mama and Papito. He bends down and hugs Maria Luz tightly. "Hasta pronto, menina," he whispers. "I will see you soon." Then turning quickly, he walks down the path. The wind pulls at Maria Luz's hair as she walks to school. The dry season has set in and there is dust in the air and wispy clouds high above. As she walks, she thinks of her father in the highlands. He has been gone for 3 months now. Could he be looking at the same clouds? The village school has just one room for all 80 students. It is crowded and dark. Maria Luz slides onto a bench beside her amigo Alfredo Gonzalez. This year, the students have a surprise. A new teacher. His name, he tells them, is Don Pedro Morales. He is not much taller than Maria Luz, but he has big ideas. The first week, Don Pedro teaches his students how to make windows. This school is good for bats and owls, but not for children, he exclaims, flapping his arms. Soon there is daylight streaming into the classroom, making it easier for Maria Luz and others to read and write. After class, Don Pedro picks up a hoe and climbs up the low hill behind the school. Maria Luz is curious. "Are you making a garden?" she asks. Don Pedro nods. "Well, it will not grow much." She tells him of her garden and how the land has gone bad. Don Pedro stops his hoeing. "Then there is only one solution, Senorita. We must feed the soil and make it good again." Don Pedro heaps up old leaves, corn husks, and bean pods. Maria Luz has watched her father do the same, then burn this waste. But Don Pedro does not burn it. He says he is making food for the soil instead. He covers the pile with a big piece of plastic. With the help of worms and grubs, he explains, the old plants will break down into food for the soil called compost. Don Pedro asks Maria Luz to stir the compost every day with a stick and make sure it stays damp. He will collect manure from the school's chicken coop and add it to the pile. "Our soil will have a feast," he says. "See," laughs Alfredo, who is passing by. "Maria Luz will make dirt soup." But Maria Luz just smiles. She stirs the compost and imagines Papa eating his plantains, tortilla, beans, and cream. Can a garden have a favorite meal too? Don Pedro's next gardening project is a big one. Maria Luz watches as he shovels the soil into giant steps he calls terraces. They rise like a staircase up the hill behind the school. Many people in town come to see the spectacle. Some of them point and shake their heads, but they listen when Don Pedro explains that the terraces make flat surfaces for planting and keep the soil from washing downhill with the rains. On the side of each step, he plants vines and grass to hold the terrace in place. Don Pedro mixes rich compost into the soil, then pokes holes in the terraces and plants his seeds. The campesinos nod and whisper but fall silent when the maestro plants marigolds in rows beside the seeds. "Has he gone loco?" they wonder. "It may look crazy," laughs Don Pedro, "but the marigolds will keep the insects away." Over the next few days, more and more families come by to watch and learn. Some ask Don Pedro how to make terraces, others ask Maria Luz how to make compost. Still, others admire the marigolds, which Don Pedro calls the smiles of the soil. Everyone is wondering the same thing. Could these new ideas help their gardens too? But it is too late for one family. Alfredo's parents have run out of corn and the coyote will not lend them more. They must leave their land and go to live with relatives. Maria Luz waves sadly to Alfredo as he helps his family carry off their belongings. Maria Luz knows the same thing could happen to her family and to many other families in the village. Maria Luz begins to try some of Don Pedro's new ways at home. She makes small terraces for her family's winter vegetables. Her steps look rough and uneven, but they will hold the soil. Pepito toddles out to sea. He grabs a handful of compost and pats it into a terrace, just as he has seen his big sister do. Won't Papa be surprised to find two gardeners when he comes home? She remembers all her father has taught her. She pokes holes in the soil and pushes the seeds down deep. She saves one small terrace for something new. Don Pedro has given her a packet of radish seeds. He says they will sprout in just a few weeks and sell for a good price at the market. Maria Luz pictures the coins she will earn and dreams of what she might do with them. Should she take Pepito for his vaccinations or save to buy a burro? Pepito pulls at her to go. She gives his little hand a squeeze and picks up the watering can. We have fed our soil, Pepito. Now we must give it a drink. The work has made them hungry, but Maria Luz knows that only a small mound of beans and a little tortilla dough remain. Once these are gone, they will have nothing, unless her father has found work. Her radish money may not go to her dreams but to buy food. The air is growing warmer and the school's little hillside is sprouting. The garden is now part of their classroom. Don Pedro asks his students to count the radish shoots and to measure the distance between onions. He has them divide seeds into equal piles. Every day at home, Maria Luz checks her vegetables. The tomatoes and chilies are small and green, and the onions are still asleep underground. But her radishes poke their red tops out of the soil into the warm sun. You must grow fat, she tells them. You must. Someone else is also watching Maria Luz's radishes. One day, as she weeds with Pepito, a long shadow falls across her vegetable rows. You are growing crops for cash, I see, says the growly voice of Senor Lobo, the local coyote. Perhaps you would like me to take them to market for you. Maria Luz does not raise her eyes. Her hands tremble. She shakes her head but does not speak. She hears the coyote snort and watches his shadow retreat. She knows he will be back. Just then Mama calls out, Come, Maria Luz, Pepito, come to the house, we have news. Maria Luz and Pepito scramble to the house. Mama has received word from Papa. He did find work and will be home soon. Gracias a Dios, exclaims Maria Luz and hugs Mama and Pepito. A few days later, Maria Luz is working in their garden when something catches her eye. Her heart skips a beat. A familiar sombrero is bobbing up the path to her house. Papa, Papa, Maria Luz breaks into a run. Mi carino, shouts Papa, holding out his arms. At last he has returned. Papa bounces Pepito on his knee and over strong hot coffee tells Mama and Maria Luz about work in the highlands. Long back-breaking days on a coffee plantation were worth it, he says. He has earned enough for seeds and fertilizer. Maria Luz wriggles in her chair. What is it, Maria Luz? Asks Papa. I think you can save your fertilizer money for something else. Come see our garden. Papa looks in wonder at the little terraces and the compost heap, the sprouting vegetables and the fat radishes. Where have you learned these things? He asks. Maria Luz takes Papa's hand and walks him down the path to the village school. Don Pedro is at work in the school garden. Maestro, calls Maria Luz. I want you to meet me, Padre. Mucho gusto, says Don Pedro, pumping Senor Darde's hand. Your daughter is my best helper. Papa talks a while with Don Pedro on the way home. He tells Maria Luz how proud he is of all she has learned in school and in the garden. I should go away more often, he jokes. But since I'm back, I'm going to be your helper. Maria Luz is thankful for her garden, and so is her father. As she walks to school and back, she notices that other families are improving their land. Their neighbors are building terraces and piling up compost. Little by little, Don Pedro's ideas are taking root in the hills of the village. Senor Lobo comes by again, and he too sees the changes. This year the villagers will have winter vegetables to sell to him, he thinks. The coyotes goes from campesino to look at the onions and chilies. He names a price, and as always his price is low. If they accept it, they will barely have enough money to buy the seeds they need. But Don Pedro has another big idea. He says the villagers should take their vegetables to the market to sell for themselves, and offers to show them how. The campesinos are not sure. They have always sold to Coyote. They are afraid to go to the market and bargain with the shopkeepers. Maria Luz thinks about the coins she could earn by selling her radishes. She begs and begs her father, and finally he agrees. They will go with Don Pedro. Market day dawns clear and bright, and Maria Luz and Papa sling their sacks of vegetables onto a neighbor's burro. Maria Luz pats her bunches of radishes, and then they join Don Pedro on the long walk to town. Maria Luz can't wait to see the market, but she can tell that Papa is nervous. He tucks his sombrero over his brow and is very quiet. When they finally arrive, what sounds and colors greet them? Baskets of winter vegetables are stacked everywhere. There are farm tools and fertilizers, mules, ponies, pigs, and even parrots. Coyotes gather near the entrance like dark spirits, persuading campesinos to sell to them. But the Duartes and Don Pedro urge their burro right past. Maria Luz and Papa watch Don Pedro sell his vegetables to a shopkeeper for a good price. Then Maria Luz steps forward, holding out a bunch of round red radishes. The shopkeeper examines the radishes and buys her entire crop. Maria Luz watches the coins drop into her hand. She has received 3 times the money Senor Lobo offered. Her mind fills with dreams, but one thing is sure. She will buy more radish seeds, and she will buy seeds to grow other things the shopkeepers want. Herbs such as cilantro, garlic, and parsley. Papa, meanwhile, is looking for some seed corn and beans and making his own discovery. The seeds cost less than they do from the coyote, so he can buy more. It is time to prepare the land for corn and beans. Maria Luz and her father begin to build more terraces and feed the soil with compost. Then in 2 long days they plant their crops, and this year they do something new. They plant the beans among the corn so that the bean plants will put nutrition into the soil that corn takes out. Finally, they plant their herbs and rows of radishes. Mama and Pepito bring corn tamales stuffed with chilies for their midday meal. Mama also brings news. Sad news. She puts her arm around Maria Luz and tells her that Don Pedro has been assigned to a new town in the fall. He will be leaving the village when the school year finishes in November. Maria Luz cannot imagine the school and the school garden without Don Pedro. but she can see the change he has made as she looks around. All over the hillsides, compost piles and terraces are sprouting, and so are yellow marigolds. It is not only the soil that is changing. There is something new in the air too. A feeling of hope spreading from garden to garden. The Duarte's corn grows tall and strong over the summer, and the herbs produce 3 crops. When it is time for Don Pedro to leave, he comes to say goodbye and stops to admire their garden. "Your corn cobs are as fat as loaves," he exclaims. "Thanks to all you have taught us," says Senor Duarte, shaking Don Pedro's hand. "We will miss you very much. And I will be lucky to find another helper like your daughter," says Don Pedro. Maria Luz blushes. She wants to say something important but cannot find words. As Don Pedro leaves, she gives him a basket of radishes. "Gracias, maestro," she says softly. "Muchas gracias." The Duarte family waves goodbye to Don Pedro. Will he teach his new students to make windows and grow good gardens? Maria Luz wonders. Just then, Don Pedro turns and flaps his arms. Of course he will. This year, the Duartes have plenty of corn and beans for food and enough seeds for the next planting. Maria Luz and her padre stack the cobs high in the cookhouse and pile up the beans. With cash from their herbs and radishes, Pepito can travel to get his vaccinations. Over the next 2 years, their garden grows green and healthy. With the money they save, Maria Luz and her family buy a small, sturdy burrow and rebuild the walls of their home. In this way, one girl and one family in one village go from hunger to having enough. But this is not the end of the story. In fact, it is just the beginning. Slowly but surely, news travels about the good gardens of Maria Luz's village. Campesinos from nearby hills come to see the tall corn and new methods. They find a village of terraces and neat yards where farmers turn waste into compost and plant marigolds to keep away the insects. Like branches sprouting from a healthy vine, the new ways spread from one village to the next. More campesinos grow enough food to feed their families, and more have money to build their futures, to pay for medicine and their children's schooling. Something as simple as having enough food opens a window to greater things.